And good evening, I'm Joe Spina, and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, rally our realm, set as we see it, and frankly as well. And frankly, I want to welcome the better half of this show. Paul, you were on sabbatical last week.
I was. I missed out. I heard it was a great show.
Paul, please. Without you, it's never a great show.
Oh, stop it.
Well,
Let's just set the stage, all right? So Labor Day has come and gone. I would say that it is officially election season for the presidential race, and there is so much to talk about on this front. I can't wait to get started.
really? Well, let's talk about nothing really changes, Paul.
Yep.
I want to harken back, come up on the screen, and you can take a peek at it. Here's a quotation from President George W. the Older.
HW.
HW. You're very good. And he said, Paul, and you read, what did he say then?
If the American people ever find out what we have done, they will chase us down the street and lynch us.
That was at a June 1992 press conference. Something
That's
that
while he was still president.
Yeah, and by the way, Hillary Clinton hasn't had one in 200 and some odd days. She's allergic to press conferences.
Can I just speak to that for a second?
You can.
I hear that pundits talk about this. 275 days, which is like 9 months, that she hasn't held the press conference. Mm-hmm. At the same time that she constantly berates Donald Trump for speaking his mind. So here you have somebody who's speaking his mind and is constantly putting his foot in his mouth, and she refuses to speak. And the pundits will say that that is the appropriate campaign approach for her to take, because because if she says anything, she's going to hurt her chances. And I say that may be the right campaign approach, but that is absolutely the wrong approach from the electorate's perspective. The electorate needs to be able to hear what these people have to say. If we can listen to Donald Trump day in and day out talk about things that are viewed as racist, misogynist, blah, 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 blah.
According to whom, Paul?
According to them.
Yeah, but not really.
Right. And everything that Hillary Clinton wants to say is always, carefully honed and choreographed. Nothing ever gets out. Everything's poll tested. She's a fraud. I mean, it's a simple.
Really? Isn't that wonderful? I mean, you've discovered that fact? Paul, if you take a look at this election now, and folks, understand this. They always want to talk about that he's not doing well with the Republicans, as well as Romney, but they don't tell you the flip. They don't tell you how overwhelmingly he's ahead with independents.
Yes.
Over 20 points.
So, folks, today is September 6th. By the way, it's my anniversary. My wife and I have been married for 29 years.
Happy anniversary.
So today is September 6th, because you will be seeing this on tape delay, I'm sure, at some point. So I just wanted to point out that this morning, CNN poll, which is, everybody knows is the Clinton cable network, right?
Yeah.
News network, did a poll, and there's been a 10-point swing.
He's up 2.
From being down 8 to up 2, which is rather remarkable.
Considering that she has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in all of the battleground states vilifying him, correct?
And he hasn't spent anything.
He hasn't spent a nickel.
Right.
But think about that, folks. She's going to spend upwards to $2 billion. So she has no respect for money. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
As opposed to someone who has a lot of money who doesn't like to spend it. I like that idea.
So she spends all the money putting all the ads out, and then she refuses to talk to the American public. So the American public wants to have some serious questions they'd like to ask of Hillary Clinton, and she's MIA. Not, she'll say everything. She'll put it in an ad, put it on TV. You can hear the ad, and the ad will talk about how great she is and how terrible Trump is, but never really get into the heat of the heart of the matter.
I want to flash back to what you just read from Bush back in 1992.
Yes.
The context of that statement, if American people ever find out what we've done that chases down the street and lynch us, was in reference to the Iran-Contra deal.
Iran-Contra, yeah.
Way back then.
Right, which was something that happened under Reagan's second term.
Yeah, and he was vice president, and he was part of the CIA, so he knew.
Yep.
He used to be head of the CIA. So he knew that there was a little hanky-panky going on back then, right?
Right.
And under the table type of deal. And,
Right.
American public wasn't going to like it.
Right.
Compared to the Iran deal today, that was nothing. That was
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So can you imagine?
And I think what you're saying is, if you go back to the Iran-Contra deal, so basically, to refresh people's memories of people who are too young to remember it, what basically happened back then was it was illegal for the U.S. government to provide arms to the Nicaraguans.
Iran. Right. No, to Iran.
No, to the Nicaraguans.
And Iran. What happened is that we provided, Israel was, folks, this is great. Israel had a bunch of arms that were outdated. Let's say that they were not that good. So they sold them to the Iranians. And on the flip side, the United States replenished the Israeli supply. That was the cute little deal, so we didn't have our fingerprints on supplying arms to Iran.
Right.
At the same time, there was a spread in which also arms went to Nicaragua. And that's where you had Ollie North.
Right. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is that the Reagan administration did something that they did not want the public to know about. That's fair, right?
Basically right.
Yeah. And the left, the liberals, the Democrats had laid an egg over this. I mean, they were like out of control, freaking out over, oh my God, how could they do this? And now, today, you have what's going on with Iran, with the gun running down, and
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious.
The blow up in the Middle East, the Arab Spring.
How about the Clinton Foundation?
Oh God.
The email server, all this stuff is 10 times worse than any of that stuff that they essentially would. When a Republican does it, it's outrageous.
What they've done is exponentially worse.
Right.
And everybody says, well, there's no smoking gun.
Yeah, and here's Hillary Clinton's favorite line. There is no evidence that substantiates that claim, which means we've covered it up pretty well, so you can't prove anything.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that she didn't do it. It just means that nobody can prove that it happened.
Well,
and when she says that's a pretty insidious statement, if you ask me.
Yeah, but if you have a hammer and you start smashing, blueberries, or blackberries rather, you start smashing them, and you start sending stuff in the mail that gets lost.
And
that's okay.
And after you have been subpoenaed, you discovered that not all information has been destroyed. What did they do? They destroyed it anyway.
But when did that take place, Paul? I was talking about that took place after the fact, after the
subpoena.
No, the press came out with it. Was it New York Times?
It was in Sunday's paper, right?
No, I'm talking about initially. Initially, an article was coming out that was going to look into the Benghazi and other things. That's when they destroyed everything. After they were notified that they would have to provide it.
So they destroyed everything in the beginning.
Post facto.
And then there was one guy who forgot to destroy his, and then so the Congress asked for all information, and everything was gone except for what this one guy had, and they destroyed it after the fact.
With the hammers, but there's more than that.
But my point is that they basically are impairing a federal investigation when they do that, and this is the reason why there's no evidence.
Probably they did two dumps. They held an inquiry, an interview of Hillary Clinton on the Saturday of the 4th of July.
Right, and then they let the information out the day before the Labor Day weekend.
That's called sanitizing it.
Right.
That's trying to put it under the radar.
By the way,
and no follow-up questions.
Some of that stuff that came out, even the stuff that did come out. How about the fact that she says she's the picture of health, but except for when they asked her 39 times.
Her concussion bothered her.
And she said that she can't remember because of her concussion.
And she can only work 2 or 3 hours a day under doctor's orders. And Donald Trump says she has neither the stamina nor the capabilities to be president. You know what? He's right.
I mean, what about these coughing fits that we keep seeing?
Forget the coughing fits. The fact that the doctor said she can only work 2 or 3 hours a day as Secretary of State, you work 24 hours a day as President of the United States under tremendous stress. Take a look at Obama.
You do as a secretary, too.
Yeah. And Trump's all over the place. He's in Mexico, Arizona, Ohio, New York, Wisconsin. I mean, he's like an Energizer bunny. Compare and contrast, Paul.
Okay.
Then and now. And the then was, I see this fellow named Ronald Reagan sitting down with Gorbachev, and they're striking a deal. Tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev, during the height of the Cold War, which, by the way, Reagan effectively won.
Right.
That was called leadership. Notice the smile on his face.
Yeah, these are up on the screen, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
okay.
That's them two. So they've, you know.
Now compare that to Putin and Obama. Take a look at their faces.
Do we have to do this?
Yeah. And by the way, they had a very bad meeting just now.
90-minute meeting, and Obama has nothing to show for it.
On top of it, talk about lack of respect. Folks, understand this. The world is laughing at us, right? The president of the Philippines used a very serious pejorative toward the president of the United States. Right. When would anybody get away with that in the past?
No, I know it. And you know, and everybody, all the sympathizers to the president is saying, "Oh, but this president is a bad guy," and all that kind of stuff. And I would agree that he is a bad guy, but that doesn't mean that you can pretend that Obama has not really basically
Let me say this.
Made us look bad around the whole world.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. For him to have the stones to say that.
And get away with it. That's true. Yeah, that's another point. Yep.
That's the thing. I mean, it's a different story. Don't forget, the Chinese did not put out the red carpet for him either.
How's that, huh? And, you know, I was listening to somebody this morning talk about it, and they said that, you know, the Chinese have mastered diplomacy for the past 3,000 years. So if anybody was going to get it right, it was going to be them, and they intentionally didn't do this.
I know that.
It was.
And they're building the artificial islands in the South China Sea, which in effect controls shipping lanes.
Right.
Folks, understand this. Remember I love the slogan from the Navy, the U.S. Navy, a global force for good. And by and large, they have been. Folks, it's so important for us to control the sea lanes of the world, which we can't do now. We don't have the Navy to do it.
And by the way, I think while I agree with the controlling the sea lanes is important, especially if you're a global force for good, but the key is to not control them. It's to allow them to not be controlled. Don't you think?
Yes, that's a great point. Did you ever hear the expression "peace through strength"?
Yes, and the peace dividend.
Yeah, and the result of that was it became a peace dividend because using strength held the peace during the Cold War because nobody started throwing bombs at each other, which would have been Dr. Strangelove-ish, right? And ultimately, the Cold War ended simply because of the personal integrity and moral fortitude of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
End of story, right? Once again, tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev, right?
Right.
And he decided to do Star Wars, which drove everybody crazy because now the Soviet Union couldn't compete, and seeing that they were going to go bankrupt, you know, trying to match our military might.
Versus Barack Obama unilaterally disarming the United States. So
we're going to get into that a little later in the show because it's severe and it's a dirty little secret. But the peace dividend, as defined by
Bill Clinton,
or misunderstood by Margaret Thatcher, another great leader, by the way, female, so let's not get into this stuff that there's a glass ceiling and all. She said, call the Iron Lady, if I remember correctly.
Iron Maiden.
Very good, nice correction. You know, and Israel had a very tough woman there for a while, Golda Meir.
Golda Meir, yeah.
So, you know, this stuff about the glass ceiling, no, it's not a gender issue, Paul.
No.
It's a competency issue.
Right.
She said, Margaret Thatcher, the West as a whole in the early 1990s became obsessed with the peace dividend that would be spent over and over and over again on a number of soft-hearted, sometimes soft-headed causes. Politicians forgot that the only real peace dividend is peace.
Right.
Who became president? Who was the beneficiary of the peace dividend?
Bill Clinton.
Exactly. So you folks out there, when you listen to Hillary talk about the wonderful time and how wonderful Bill Clinton was, he was a beneficiary of all the work done by Ronald Reagan, including the economy.
Right. And then he systematically began the peace dividend by disarming the U.S. and not spending money to keep our war machine
Yeah, he went to
up to
social.
speed.
Which leads us to a theory.
A theory.
Yeah. Did you ever hear of guns and butter?
Guns and butter all the time. I remember that in college.
That's right. That's
You-
economics 101.
Right. The difference between spending money on domestic versus defense.
Exactly. However, how about guns and butter or guns or butter? That's a strange distinction, but a very important one. Because you can have
Both.
guns and butter, and it isn't a question of guns or butter.
Right.
Democrats, traditionally, Barack Obama, it's what? What's his
All
argument?
gun, all butter.
All butter, no guns.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is, you know, if it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, it's bad enough that no guns, right? But he's spending more on butter than we have. He's running huge deficits to do it.
He doubled the deficit from 9 or 10 trillion and to about 20 now. And by the way,
19.5.
I'm not giving a pass to George W. Bush.
Because he was just as bad. Yeah,
Yeah, he started it.
Right.
He started this
It
whole.
doubled under his watch too, I think.
Even though he increased the military budget, which he
Right,
did,
right.
that he had to because Clinton
And by-
eviscerated it.
And by the way, when anybody says, "Oh, but," because that's what you'll hear is, as soon as you say anything critical of Obama, they'll say, "Yeah, what about Bush?" They were both establishment, globalist type people. You know, we've had too much of that, and we are where we are because of all of them, not because of one or the other. All of them. And what we need to do is get away from that.
Yes, we'll get into that in a little bit. But I want to define peace dividend.
Okay.
So the folks out there know, peace dividend is a political slogan, popularized by the U.S. President George H.W. Bush and the U.K. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the early 1990s, purporting to describe the economic benefit of a decrease in defense spending. It is used primarily in discussions relating to the guns versus butter theory.
Right.
So
you
it
can
was
shift
the
money
balance.
from the defense
Right.
into domestic programs.
What happened is we've carried it a little far now. I want to point something out. This is current. Are you aware of the fact that there's been a 48% increase in non-combat aviation crashes?
I wasn't until you pointed it out to me. Yep. So that's let's call it 50% increase in non-combat aviation
Fatalities.
crashes.
Crashes and fatalities.
So that involves, you're talking just defense crashes, not
I'm
commercial.
talking about Marines, Air Force, Navy,
Right.
you know, okay. And I have your favorite one. You know, silence. Nobody's talking about it. Why? You know why? Because I want to hear that. Because this is the direct result of the evisceration of your military, by which you cannot have peace with strength.
Right.
Okay?
Well, I mean, not only have they allowed all the equipment to fall into disrepair, they've also said anybody who is a true general, a true warrior, and believes in a strong defense has been essentially forced to retire or pushed out of the military. Is that right?
Pretty much.
Yep.
As of April, and this is the Marine Corps' article in their magazine, Marine Corps' aviation fleet is in peril. As of April of this year, of the 276 F-18s, is that what they call them, A-18 Hornets, 276 of them. You know how many can fly? Can actually fly? 87.
Wow.
So 276, 87 can actually fly.
So that means that they're not doing anything to repair the other ones?
Maintenance, antiquated, you know.
But they're not doing anything about it.
Of the 147 CH-53E Super Stallion helicopters, and this should be interesting because we're going to tie this into General Electric and that phony little contract that just came out. Of the 147, 42 are flyable.
Right. So less than a third.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we have a splash in our newspaper about a fellow who's on the Armed Services Committee who doesn't say anything about this, they should, who happened to be a captain.
Right.
if I'm
Okay.
not
So
mistaken.
you're talking about Seth Moulton, our congressman, who has no problem with our defense spending being reduced to a level that they can't even repair our equipment. And he's clapping about creating, what did he say? He created 50 jobs, which he really didn't create.
52 jobs.
52 jobs. And they really
Maybe.
And they really weren't created because the GE has agreed to do is take an existing job, and then when somebody retires, they will replace the job. So that is not creating a job. So the headline, it says, GE creates 52 jobs, not so much.
It's worse than that, Paul.
Okay?
Because what they're doing is they're hiring 100 engineers. Those aren't average Lynn folks, right? You have to find engineers where engineers exist, correct? By the way, GE Aviation.
We have our captains of industry
too.
too.
We do, but not that you can find 100, engineers of that nature.
They're not going to go to our high schools for that. They're going to go to the colleges, the
That's
MITs
true.
and the. Right.
But also, GE Aviation is headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's another thing. Plus, this is more design work. For example, there's an F-35. That's the much updated airplane that they have now, apparently.
Yep.
It's in the works. They're trying to integrate them. Allegedly, there's an order out there for a couple of thousand of them. How many do you think we got so far?
I think we had 200 or less.
That's right.
Yeah.
200 or less. You know why? Because they can't pay for them. They haven't got any money in the budget to pay for them. So you look at Seth Moulton, who's talking about all these wonderful jobs, who's in love with butter as opposed to guns when he was supposed to be a warrior. I mean, it's a contradiction.
Right.
Now, let me give you just a fast rundown. The Air Force tactical aircraft over 20 years old. The tactical aircraft over 20 years old. You can't have that if you want to have a strong military. The Huey helicopters, 35 years old, Paul. The P-3C Orion long-range aircraft, 25 years old. The C-5A Galaxy transport aircraft, 40 years old, almost as old as you, Paul. And the KC-135 tankers that fills all the planes, 44 years old.
Right.
You can't run a military, a modern military in this
So
world.
can I play devil's advocate just for a minute? Because
Yes.
While I don't dispute any of those numbers that you point out, is there anything new?
No. The F-35 you just talked about, in which there was an order for 2,000, they got less than a couple of hundred. You can't fight wars today or maintain support of your shipping lanes and provide for the security of a nation when Albania can beat you on any given day.
Right. Jeez. It's pretty.
It's a sad
pretty
situation, yeah.
Pretty scary.
And that is one of the reasons why this election is critically important. Yep. Because who's committed to building the military? Who's talking about it? Is Hillary Clinton talking about it?
No. She doesn't talk about anything.
But who's talking about the dire necessity to build a military? Who's saying the only way you can have a nation is by making sure that it's safe? And
Donald Trump.
At the national level, the commander-in-chief is supposed to make sure that the armed forces are capable of protecting our vital interests, and domestically, that we don't have what's happening in Chicago, in which you're safer in the middle, you're safer in ISIS land than you are in Chicago.
Right.
If you happen to be African American.
I was reading this morning, the 500th homicide in Chicago this year, over the weekend.
No, for the year, 90 over the weekend.
No, there was 500 for the year, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Murders.
Right.
Or homicides. But if you take a look at people shot, several thousand.
Right.
So, being shot is not funny. You survive being shot, you don't have that great quality of life,
Right. I wish Black Lives Matter would focus on that a little bit.
Uh-huh. Now, there's a few things that I want to bring out. Because I hear this vocabulary all of the time, and nobody really wants to define it or explain it. One of them is, have you ever noticed that, Paulie, at one time you may have been pro-choice, or vice versa, but you've changed your position. You know what they call that? They call that an evolution.
They call it an evolution if it's it's whatever party is trying to make their point.
So if you go from point A, but all of a sudden you take a different position,
right.
They call that beneficially, it's an evolution. Now, we have to define evolution because it's an interesting concept.
Right.
And evolution is gradual, Paul. It's a very gradual change. Now, the hope is that it leads to the development and growth, progress, expansion, etc. That's the hope of evolution. You know, you and I evolved from a worm. So we kind of improved along the way, but it took a long time, like a couple 100 million years, right?
Right.
The reality is that evolution, not necessarily a good thing. Can be, but not necessarily.
Right.
Cancer, which is evolutionary, is not a good thing, right? What about a revolution, Paul? What's a revolution?
It's, well, it's usually when through some type of force is a radical change, right?
That's the key. Radical, immediate change, which can really dishevel situations, right? However, there are times when it's necessary. So, evolution,
1767.
that was a good revolution because we changed, you know, it was sudden. We went from being dependent on the British Crown to becoming independent nations, right?
Right.
But that was quick, fast. It didn't take place over time. Flip-flop, they're all kind of related. Like that term, a flip-flop?
Yeah, well, you know, if somebody's, it's used in ad hominem attacks to say that somebody flip-flops, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And, you know, so there was a guy, he was a big, I don't know, techie, you know, Google or one of those companies out in California who 8 years ago made a $1,000 donation to a pro or anti-gay marriage initiative that was going to be on the ballot.
Okay.
It happened 8 or 9 years ago. Somebody found out that had happened 8 or 9 years ago and recently forced him out of his job because of it. So that would be, you know, so, and the reason I point this out is because at the same stretch of time, from 2006, when Barack Obama said that he was opposed to gay marriage, and then he evolved.
He evolved, of course.
In 2014, yes. So he got a pass. He was allowed to evolve, and this other guy made a $1,000 donation because he believed in the sanctity of traditional marriage.
20 years ago.
He gets fired from his job because of his view of 8 years ago.
So you're telling me that evolution, or that little flip, right, which is basically a flip or flip-flop. Let me define flip-flop because we can go on for it, because this is fascinating. A flip-flop is a change also for political expediency. At least it's an honest thing, that's the claim. Now the hope of a flip-flop is to dupe the people.
Right.
The reality is you likely lied.
Either before or after. And the interesting thing, and this is what I notice from Hillary Clinton all the time. What you'll hear is in the course, if you pay attention to her all the time, like I do, and I know you do as well, you'll hear that she will say, I'm pro-defense, I'm opposed to defense. I'm pro-trade, I'm against trade. She says, she doesn't even flip-flop. She just says both sides of it, hoping that people will hear the side that matters to them the most, and then they'll support her because of that. She has no position on anything. She has less principles and less positions that she holds dear than anybody I've ever seen in politics. None. So she'll do whatever she wants once she gets elected.
So she flip-flopped on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right?
Yep.
On one hand, she said it was the gold standard, and now she's opposed to it, right?
Right. That's because poll testing said that she needed to do that. And basically, if she's speaking to a group of supporters of trade, she'll talk in favor of trade. If she's speaking to a group that are opposed to trade, she will imply that she's not for it.
Explain to me, Paul.
She lies whenever she can.
This is post-Labor Day, right?
Yep.
Explain to me why Labor would support Hillary Clinton when her husband and she was so much in favor of NAFTA, which is anathema to Labor.
You know, that's such a great question. You know, at home. So why on earth would Labor support Hillary and Bill Clinton for all they did to hurt the labor force, right? NAFTA, as you said, and TPP. And it goes back to some conversations we've had in the past weeks. They are not pro-worker. They are pro-union. And why are they pro-union? Because the union gives them a ton of money to keep them in power. And people need to understand that the difference between the union, people who run the union, and the workers is very different. And in fact, I think in this election, probably more than any other election in our time, there will be a break between what the union says. You know, they're going to say, you need to vote for Clinton. And I think a lot of those union workers are going to go into the poll, they're going to pull back the curtain, and they're going to vote their conscience. And I'll bet you that they break with the union leadership, which is saying, you must vote for Clinton because she's best for us, when in fact she's really not best for anybody, in my view.
You and I, Lynn guys.
Lynn guys. I used to be in a union.
General Electric's significant employer in the city of Lynn, traditionally for all my adult life, right, early in adult life. Why would anybody in the Democratic Party support a candidate or a philosophy or a party that in effect chooses butter over guns, which in effect puts the people who work in the factories in the city of Lynn out of business, because the factories in the city of Lynn are predicated on guns. They build jet engines, mainly for the military.
Right.
Because, folks, commercial airlines, you know, they don't crash.
Right.
They're not destroyed in war. But F-18s are.
Right.
You have to keep rebuilding.
Well,
them.
you know, and I think it's, you know, it's important for everybody to understand, you know, and I have to struggle with this all the time. If you think about, on a daily basis, the decisions that have to be made about whether to build up the military or reduce the military or spend money on entitlement programs or not, and all that kind of stuff, for every action that we take as a society, you know, there's a reason why it's not a good idea. So these decisions are not easily made. We take positions that are conservative in nature, and there are positions that the liberals will take that are liberal in nature. And frankly, there's no right answer here. You know what I mean? I mean, there are some very bad and wrong answers, but it's not a simple answer every time.
You said something profound just now. If you finished it off with Sir Isaac Newton, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
So you have to think about what you're doing, because there's going to be a consequence to that.
And here, and can I interrupt you for a second? Because this is where I really have a hard time with Hillary Clinton and generally with Democratic politicians, is they see the action and reaction as, you know, if I take this action, what is the political ramifications of what I do? Not what's going to happen to the country, or is it good for the country or wrong for the country? How is it going to make sure that I maintain my power? How is it going to make sure that I get reelected? Remember, what did Clinton famously say with the hot mic to Medvedev? He basically said, I can't talk about that now until after the election. And why? Because, you know, he can't tell the people that he's going to screw them in the end. Right? That's basically...
You don't win votes when you're telling people heads I win, tails you lose.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think Donald Trump is saying heads I win, tails you lose. I think
That's the problem, because that's why he's being vilified.
Because he's going to do what's in the best interest of the country and the people.
It's interesting that you say that, because the next word coming up is pivot, which happens to be like the evolution.
I love this one. And I love listening to the politicians. The politicians get on TV, the pundits, they get on TV and they talk openly about how they are manipulating the masses. Openly. I can't believe that they do it. They say, well, now we were heavy conservative during the primaries, and now we're going to pivot to the middle so that we can, you know, basically get the people in the middle, which basically means that they either were lying before, they're going to lie now, or maybe they were lying in both situations. They're not going to do anything that the people want.
A pivot, folks, is a buzzword with a political dual meaning. It's a comprehensive change, another change, by the way, a comprehensive change in campaign strategy, as well as the practice of ducking uncomfortable issues and questions by emphasizing something favorable. That's
right.
A pivot, okay?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay. Now, you were talking, and we were talking about Donald Trump. Let me quote Donald Trump. and anybody who says he hasn't said this is lying. I don't want to change. I don't want to pivot. I mean, you have to be you. If you start pivoting, you're not being honest with people.
Right.
That is such a profound truth.
It's refreshing.
Refreshingly, and he's getting vilified for it.
Right.
For being Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what people got behind him on, so he has to stay true to his word.
Well, let me ask you this. Were you offended by his opening statement about immigration? Frankly, I think he's been misrepresented. What he said was, illegal immigrants, some who come to this country, and he said some, he wasn't talking about a total universe. Our history has shown that we are getting some bad people coming here in drugs. Is that not true?
It absolutely is true.
So why was that racist? Why, I mean, was he vilifying the Mexican people per se? No, he was vilifying those characters. And by the way, many of the folks coming across that southern border aren't necessarily Mexican.
The establishment controls all the levers of power, and they are deathly afraid of Donald Trump because he will take away their key to the city type of thing. And anything that he says must be vilified, otherwise they're going to be out of a job. You talked about a future relative of yours and how he stands to benefit by becoming a lobbyist at some point in his career, right? And we won't get into names or anything like that. But if you stand to benefit from the status quo, and I don't care what role you play in society, aren't you going to, the tendency is to stick with the status quo, right? And you get an awful lot of that. And so all the levers of power are run by people who like the status quo. And Donald Trump is not a status quo guy, and neither am I.
Think about this, Paul, and folks in Frankly Speaking land. You can think about it also. The New York Police Department has 34,000 policemen on the beat. Now, if you add the whole universe, it's 51,000.
You mean the whole state?
No, in the city of New York.
Oh, okay.
The city of New York itself has 34,000.
Then they have the transit
patrolmen.
people, the transit, and then
right.
And this
but
and
if you
that.
add up the whole universe, administrators and
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yep.
they have 51,000 employees. The Border Patrol.
That protects our borders?
Borders. We have two borders, people forget. The southern border is not that big. It's a couple of thousand miles, but the northern border is 3,000 minimum.
Right.
Okay? Total universe of Border Patrol, 20,000.
Right.
Do you see the...
Well, yes and no. I'll say that I agree. It doesn't sound right that I mean, I know New York is the biggest city in the world, right? And so you would think they would need a lot of police officers. I just don't see it as a natural comparison to Border Patrol. But I understand your point in that we know we need 51,000 people to take care of the city of New York. Why wouldn't we feel equally about protecting our borders, right? Is that your point?
Something like that. The New York Police Department is the 7th largest army in the world. Okay? What I'm saying is, if you put that much effort, thank you, Giuliani, if you put that much effort into making sure that the folks in New York City are secure,
Yep.
then why doesn't it make sense to have a standing, quote-unquote, army of Border Patrol people? Most of them are going to be deployed down south because that's where our real problems are taking place currently, right? That is a number that makes sense. Now, 20,000 doesn't make sense. That would keep Foxborough Stadium, would make them bankrupt, right?
Right.
If they only got 20,000 folks
Right.
there on any given Sunday. So how do you expect to be able to patrol, and that's a 24-hour, just like, the police is 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 and a quarter, right?
Right.
So what I'm suggesting is that the emphasis and the allocation is wrong. We have really serious national problems as a consequence of an unsecured border.
Right. And by the way, I think that I don't think enough people emphasize the fact that in addition to the free flow of people immigrating into this country, we also have a very serious issue with drugs crossing the border. We have human trafficking. We have guns going down to Mexico.
Both ways, two-way
Fast and
street,
Furious,
yeah.
and the illegal flow of cash across the border.
What about disease?
Disease. So my point is that when people say you can't build a wall, that's not who we are. You know, forget about who we are. Let's focus on what's important for us, and that is the protection of our borders and the protection of our citizenry as best we can from all of those points that I just raised. It's not just about the fact that there are some immigrants that come into this country that are, criminals, and if they weren't here, they couldn't commit crime, because that does happen too. But the flow of drugs is probably the biggest thing. If we could do anything to curtail that, I can't imagine that the progressives, the Democrats, the liberals, all those people that lean left out there would say that if we built a wall and we could stop the flow of drugs into this country, it wouldn't be a good thing. Do you? Do you think that they would say that? I don't think they talk about it on purpose, because they don't want to worry about, they don't want to, muddy the issue. The issue to them is really getting as many Democrat voters into this country as possible. And for the Republicans, it's to get the cheap labor into this country. They don't care about the impact on the people that are already here.
If I hear that expression you just used a few minutes ago, that's not who we are, from Barack Obama, one more time I'm going to vomit.
Right.
And the same with Hillary Clinton, what she's trying to tell us, we're better than that, we're better.
He's trying to make us feel, they want us to feel guilty.
Hubris. That is the height of hypocrisy, and that is the height of hubris. Who we are, primarily, is a nation that deserves to be protected, that deserves to do three little things. We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's it, my friend. And that's the purpose of government. And the first purpose of a president is to secure the nation.
Right.
That means you've got to build a military. That means you've got to protect your borders. That means you have to keep the people safe in a macro sense.
Right.
Internally, you have to flip it and support your police departments and not vilify them. And listen, we all know that there's always imperfections in all things, right?
Right.
If you harp on the imperfections, you'll never see the beauty. And that's the problem with progressives. They're always turning off, I'm afraid of that one cop that's rogue. And statistics and facts and reality don't comport to that.
Right.
And we've got to get away from that. We've got to understand our acceptable limits. We have airplanes for a reason, and airplanes crash. Nobody's saying let's get rid of cars or airplanes, things that kill people, because the benefit far outweighs the negatives, right?
Right.
And we have to approach the border in the same way. Trump came out and said something extremely important. I wish people would understand this. Not only is he going to build a wall, but that argument that, they can dig under or they can take a fence, a ladder and go over. Not with fences they can't.
Right, and I think to your point is, there's a big difference between unfettered access and, a blockade of sorts, I mean, maybe some people will get through, but not everybody's going to get through. Right now, I was reading on Drudge. Check out Drudge Report. It's a great source of information that you're not being fed in the media. But Drudge claims that 80% of the people crossing the border that are captured by the Border Patrol are released into the United States.
Of course.
So they're not even all they're really doing is saying, give me your name, address, and, give me some information, but they probably take their fingerprints and say, off you go. And what they're doing with that is they're going to use that, to my way of thinking, they'll use that information to say that they were here. Once if they ever get to an amnesty, they'll be able to prove that they were here, so they'll automatically be granted amnesty. That's why the spigot's open and they're flowing in as fast as they can right now. And by the way, do you really believe it's only 11 million people?
No.
It's probably more like 30 million, right?
Do you remember before we were unceremoniously thrown off of cable TV when there was all types of funny things happening down at the old location?
Yes.
And back then, this is before the immigration issue really became what it became. I said to you, and we talked about this privately when we went to see Jeff Kuna, you know,
Yep.
and the mayor was there, when the unaccompanied minors was a big issue. And I said, my solution, I'm an immigrant, folks. Io parlo italiano. My father and mother both were born in a foreign land, as were some of my siblings. So, you know, I know about the immigrant experience. I said, shut off immigration for 10 years or whatever it takes, so we can absorb, you know, basically shut it down, secure the borders, you know, enforce our immigration laws, and realistically, and this is going to get me in trouble with the conservatives, right? Realistically, absorb whoever's here now, because it's probably practically impossible to get rid of them, right?
Right.
So you absorb them over this 10, 20-year period of time while you shut down immigration, which you're going to have to do.
Right.
And you shut down the border, and then you can get your country back.
Right.
Those are simple steps.
Right. You just think about the floods that they had down in Louisiana, right? Mm-hmm. Rain. This is a great analogy. The rain just comes, like you get 10 inches in a matter of hours, right? Big puddles and floods, and you know, cars are floating down the street and all that kind of stuff. And why is the water up so high? It's because it doesn't have a chance to absorb into the ground.
Great analogy.
So the idea is to allow time, you know, hopefully it doesn't rain for a week, and then eventually the water will seep in and find its level, right? And I think that's really what you're talking about. But I want to take this one step further.
Okay.
And, you know, this whole business of, you know, can't do amnesty. You know, you're talking about, you know, afraid of how the conservatives are going to view this whole thing. And then the other side says you can't deport everybody. So I've got what I think is a great solution, and it's built on your premise that you want to allow people to get absorbed into the system. If people are here illegally and aren't deported for other illegal crimes, you know, in other words,
that's a given.
after you get rid of all the bad actors and then you have what's left, you can basically say to everybody who is here illegally still, but are basically, you know, good citizens, and they're not, citizens isn't the right word, good people, they're not causing any trouble and all that kind of stuff. You can say to them, you have two choices. You can either have this, quote, legal status that will never allow you the right to vote, will never allow you certain things that come with being a citizen of the United States, or you can get in the back of the line and we'll let you vote when you come back.
That's a great point. So you're talking about you can be a resident of the United States, but not a citizen with its full rights. You're not going to receive benefits.
Right.
You're not going to receive food stamps. You're not going to be able to vote. You can be a resident. You can work. You can collect Social Security, not collect Social Security, pay into the systems.
Yeah.
I suspect if you paid into the system, you're entitled to.
Right. And look, the details of something like this would really have to be sorted out, I think. I mean,
But it's not that difficult to do if you have the will to do it, Paul.
And all I'm saying is that this would solve the problem of, you know, the Republicans and the conservatives saying absolutely in no uncertain terms will they ever have the right to vote, and then from the liberal and the progressive perspective that you can't deport all these people. It's just it would be unfair. It would be this. It would be that. You know, it's not who we are.
Oh yeah. Don't say that term. It really drives me nuts.
But I mean, those are those are, in essence, Trump's solution deal breakers for both sides. You know, I mean, this is a way of having a compromise that I think would work for everybody.
Here's a dirty little secret. You like dirty little secrets?
I do.
Ooh.
You want dirty little secrets about what goes on in this country, go to Drudge Report. Drudge Report.
He's good, great aggregator. Of those folks, you know, so we get criminals in this country that commit crimes. We say, okay, that's it, we're going to deport you. There's only one little problem. The country that we want to deport them from might not want them. What do we do then? And we have that problem.
We actually have a law that says that if the country will not take them back, then we immediately shut off all visas or something, right? And we
Doesn't happen, though.
But we don't do that, right?
No. What I'm saying to you is there are a bunch of countries that will not take back. They don't want the criminals either. So we have to understand, and Obama has not pushed that issue.
Well, I mean,
so a lot of these undesirables have no place to go and they stay here.
Now, what was that thing that happened back? I think it must have been back in the '80s. What they call it, the Marietta boat lift.
Oh, yes.
That was all, Castro sent us all his dregs of society, right?
Yeah, Castro said, you want him? You got him. Yeah. You know, Tony Manero came out, Scarface, you know what I mean?
And they all ended up...
Cacaroccio. That type of stuff. I mean, it was just, it's the insanity. Once again, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Are we running out of time, Joe?
We got a couple of minutes.
Because
I
wanted an announcement.
Yeah.
You know, so today is the first Tuesday of September, and normally we would be voting today.
That's true.
And we're not voting today. Why? My understanding is that this is a Jewish holiday, and that's like the reason for it. I'm not even sure which one it is. The fact is, if you want to vote, there's an election this week, a primary election, and the voting is Thursday. Usually it's on Tuesday. Everybody knows that. So all you at home, remember, Thursday, get out to vote. It's important. It's an important part of our civic duty. And you know, there's the sheriff's race, and there's a state rep race up in that involves 2 precincts in Ward 1, along with Sauga. So please get out to vote, and you know, just vote once.
On that note, Paul, we only have a few seconds left. What troubles me as I notice this election season is that if you are the darling of the Democratic City Committee, they band together and they support their little candidates.
No matter what.
No matter what. That's the point. No matter what.
They're told this is who we're going to support, and everybody says okay. And you know, right? You know, it's look up the word lemming, L-E-M-M-I-N-G. If you don't know it, folks at home, look up the word lemming.
Well, let's save that for next week.
Yeah.
Now make them look it up and find out what it is, and,
yeah, we'll
and that'll be our opening topic next week. The lemons.
It'll give you an idea of you know, people that vote Democrat all the time because why? Because because they're Democrats. That's the only reason they vote Democrat is because they're Democrats, and it's just kind of a.
Folks, wasn't it nice having Paul back again? I mean, see how refreshing, and the show have great movement. And Paul, it's your turn to look into the camera and say bye-bye.
See you next week, folks.